little do you code a nervous breakdown.
By 99, horror games had established a formula. I mean, Resident Evil had done most of the heavy lifting, fixed camera angles, inventory pressure, awkwardly shaped keys for some reason.
Spaces that were designed as puzzles first and places second. The genre knew how to trap you in ration panic. What it didn't really know yet was how to make a place feel unwell.
And that was a trade-off, right? Scare players? Sure, but make sure it's still readable enough that they know where to go and what to grab.
Silent Hill came in and screwed with that balance. It didn't throw the genre out completely, it just poisoned it a little. It made navigating the streets feel miserable. The radio actively weaponized the silence. Hell, the town itself operated more like a symptom. Other games built dangerous locations for you to explore. Silent Hill dropped you into a municipality that is actively falling apart right in front of you, which is why playing it felt so strange at the time. I mean, the whole experience was genuinely distressing. This game just basically hands you a bad state of mind and leaves you completely alone with it.
I mean, imagine pitching deliberate psychological distress as a core gameplay feature in 99, then, actually trying to pull it off on a console that looked like it was still losing the argument with straight lines.
Silent Hill did begin its life as competition. I mean, Konami greenlit it in the late 90s because survival horror was selling. On the most basic level, this was a company looking at somebody else's hit and going, yeah, we want some of that too. But once Team Silent got a hold of it, distress became the actual blueprint. This wasn't some neat haunted house puzzle box where the PlayStation hardware limitations made it scary by accident.
Because the original PlayStation, it wasn't built for subtle dread, it was built to fight you in public. I mean, Toyama even described building a fully polygonal town and that hardware is a dangerous challenge, which kind of sounds like a polite Japanese way of saying this is probably a terrible idea.
But this is where it gets interesting because those limitations, they didn't kill the atmosphere, they became the atmosphere. The fog is the obvious example, right? And part of it was to cover the PlayStation's draw distance, but it did a lot more than just hide the technical seams. It turned the whole town into a question mark. You couldn't see very far, so the world always felt incomplete. If you add in the darkness, the empty streets, and that completely useless flashlight, it feels like the town is actively withholding secrets from you.
It's crazy because the hardware just kept taking things away and the team kept turning those absences into atmosphere. I mean, it basically built the whole town and mood out of what they couldn't show you. The moment a horror game stops explaining every little detail, your brain starts filling in the blanks. And your brain, turns out, is kind of an asshole. The director Keiichiro Toyama said that the challenge was to build a setting that felt real instead of a stereotypical video game setting. The language he kept circling around was dream language, fragment, memory. He described adventure games like somebody else's dream, which perfectly explains why the town functions as a psychological trap. Shooting for a concept like that back then is completely unhinged. I mean, you're ditching pre-rendered backgrounds to build a fully 3D town, real-time, on a PlayStation 1. That's already a massive technical liability. The rest of the industry was just out here trying to make a jump scare work. Team Silent was trying to build a symptom. And once you know that, it starts showing up everywhere. Harry isn't some action hero. Toyama said flat out that he wanted him to be a plain normal person, someone awkward enough that the player could project themselves onto him. And Takeuchi Sato pushed that same idea into the visuals. Team Silent wanted to take the everyday, ordinary things and twist them just enough to create discomfort. That's why so much of Silent Hill feels wrong before it even feels dangerous. The school, the hospital, chain link fences. Because nothing says we're doing great as a community quite like a rusty wheelchair in an abandoned alley.
Other games try to scare you. This one takes things that you already recognize and basically just leaves them to rot. The town attacks you by taking places that your brain does understand and suddenly scrambles that logic. The sound was built around that same principle. I mean, Akira Yamaoka basically said that he avoided the traditional background music in Silent Hill because he wanted to imagine what the world would sound like if it actually existed. He rejected the cinematic music and usual gameplay language simply because it didn't apply here. That choice matters more than people give it credit for. The soundtrack refuses to cue you clearly. More than 2 decades later, people still can single out the first time they heard that radio static. That raw sound design is one of the first things that actually infects you.
Which also helped them avoid one of horror games' favorite bad habits. Telling you exactly what to feel every 6 seconds with a music sting or a camera show.
Toyama later said that if he had to explain what set Silent Hill apart, it was the atmosphere. And when the game finally released, reviewers were circling the same exact idea,
just in louder, dumber magazine language.
One review said that the person who conceived it needed help. The other described the sound as more atmospheric than melodic and warned not to listen to it in the dark. They were all landing on the same truth, that players were reacting to the game's ability to make the entire experience feel contaminated.
But it wasn't all good. I mean, critics did complain about the voice acting. They pointed out that the conversations could sound like 2 people trying to leave a voicemail. They complained complained about the stubborn tank controls, the camera blind spots, and that the camera models sometimes look like a pile of jagged shapes trying to wear a coat. I mean, which was completely fair because Harry's face had the emotional range of a cinder block. But, it was also a PlayStation 1 game, so,
The most interesting part is what the critics actually agreed on, the mood. The feeling that the town was actively malignant. Even when the mechanics failed, nobody denied that the psychological hostility worked exactly as intended.
I mean, that's the exchange right there, right? You put up with the stiff movement, the jagged polygons, and the game hands you a place that still feels hostile decades later. I mean, and once a town feels this damage, the story basically has no choice. The narrative has to follow the exact same sickness.
Silent Hill opened small on purpose. Harry Mason crashes his car at the end of town, wakes up alone, and goes looking for his daughter through streets that are already coming apart. It sets that ordinary baseline as something you can hold on to before the escalation hits. Within an hour, you're dealing with doppelganger children, buried cult history, a woman named Dahlia treating prophecy like a casual conversation, an entire alternate world operating like a bloody infrastructure failure.
I mean, the best part is how completely unqualified Harry is for all of it. You aren't playing some SWAT action hero built for this. I mean, Harry gets tired, he stumbles, he swings a pipe like a man actively trying not to die, and when the town starts speaking in symbols, he's completely out of his depth, which is exactly what makes it work. Because if Harry acted like he understood any of the shit that was going on, the whole spell would die immediately. I mean, nobody in Silent Hill talks like they want to clear things up. They talk like they're half a sentence ahead of you and, especially not interested in slowing down.
Every environment behaves like a mind under pressure. I mean, the school, the hospital, none of it acts like a natural place. Find Your Daughter is purely a cover story. What you're actually trying to do is just survive, keep moving through a place that's externalizing a massive psychological collapse.
Which leaves you two tactical options: pray and pause. And let me tell you, that pause button was doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Trying to summarize this plot? Useless. But that psychological residue? It stays anyway, because you remember the situation of chasing answers through spaces that aggressively resist interpretation. The town weaponizes its clues and basically hands you a jagged piece of somebody's worst night, and you're told to put those pieces together. Every single answer arrives damaged.
Once a game is ever to burrow that far into your head, the standard fight monsters, solve puzzle logic is completely dead. The mechanics have to match the sickness. If the gameplay doesn't carry the exact same weight, the whole illusion just slips.
Silent Hill still hands you the standard survival horror toolkit. You're managing inventory, you're still digging around for those awkwardly shaped keys, but the actual application is entirely hostile. I mean, the radio spits static when something's close by, the flashlight barely gives you enough visibility to panic properly, and walking down the hallway feels like you're testing the structural integrity of the floorboards.
It's actually a pretty nasty trick because information in games is supposed to calm you down. Here, it just makes you anticipate something awful.
The game thrives on incomplete signals. I mean, you'll hear a burst of static and then immediately swing around to check out a room that you know you've already cleared. The mechanics aren't there to solve your panic. They're there to organize them. And that's why the gameplay kind of really sticks with you. The standard mechanics feel completely poisoned here. The radio actively contaminates the silence. The flashlight carves out this one tiny spot of visibility and leaves the rest of the darkness to breathe. Even the map stops functioning as a tool and just sits there, proving that you're trapped in this massive space. Combat operates on the exact same bad frequency. I mean, every encounter feels awkward and desperate. You're swinging pipes in a cramped space. You're firing blindly into the fog just to buy yourself some space to move.
Because fighting can't be smooth or clean. If it is, then the illusion completely snaps. I mean, you can't build a town this hostile and just let the players stroll through it with confidence.
Now, to be fair, the combat can feel stiff. The camera feels like it's actively conspiring against you, especially in tight spaces. You're dealing with a very heavy layer of late 90s PlayStation jank. Every single system presses on the exact same nerve. I mean, the clumsiness actually forces you to stay unsettled. It leaves this lingering, uncomfortable residue. And that residue is exactly why the nightmare outlived its own hardware. That's the strange thing about Silent Hill. The exact elements that make it effective also keep it from being an easy, uncomplicated playthrough. I mean, the visual identity and the sound design is phenomenal, but the actual execution is covered in friction. The central trade-off has always been you accept the clumsy mechanics to access the incredible mood. And that tension has really followed the game ever since day one.
Which is completely fair. I mean, Silent Hill is hardly a flawless sacred object. I mean, parts of it are deeply awkward. There's entire stretches where it absolutely mistakes friction for mystery.
But reducing it to age badly, I think misses the point completely. I mean, older horror games usually lose their grip because the tension evaporates, and that leaves a slower game. Silent Hill survives because its best tricks are pure sensory. You remember the industrial sounds, the fog, the location, the sense of navigating a place that was damaged long before you arrived. The controls are a mess, but the psychological intrusion really holds up perfectly. You know, that's how games actually survive extreme specificity. I mean, Silent Hill has too much texture to evaporate. Every ugly little choice points in the exact same direction. The game commits entirely to the sickness. So even the mechanics that frustrate you still operate inside that same bad emotional weather.
Which meant the flaws, they were a fundamental part of the exchange rate. I mean, you put up with the PlayStation era abrasion and in return the game infected you. I mean, clean, polished horror games rarely manage that.
What happened after Silent Hill was kind of weird. I mean, the sequels usually get the praise, later entries start the argument. The first game kind of just sits there at the mouth of the timeline doing the heavy lifting of establishing the actual vocabulary, the fog, the radio static, the familiar places gone completely rotten. It built the horror model based entirely on the mental abrasion.
I mean, history does this consistently, right? The original builds the language, the sequels get crowned a masterpiece, and then everybody just quietly borrows the grammar and pretend it was always there.
The original Silent Hill locked in a very specific version of horror. It prioritized emotional aftertaste. Emotional complexity was the actual point. The game obviously scares you, but the main achievement is leaving behind a bad internal weather system.
Nobody's going to remember this as a tidy PS1 museum piece. They're going to remember the textures, the hallways, that snow, that ain't snow, that freaking radio. It all just lodges into your brain like a bad dream. Vivid, all disjointed, yet completely impossible to shake. Everything that eventually got flattened into the Silent Hill formula. It's incredibly abrasive here. It carries that ugly late 90s confidence. It didn't become prestige horror yet. It was still an awkward, sticky thing testing ideas out in public. The original is completely unfiltered. Which is honestly where some of the best stuff lives. I mean, long before the identity hardens, back when nobody actually knew which parts were supposed to be iconic.
The legacy of this game is the psychological vocabulary that it permanently installed within the genre. It taught the industry how to weaponize obscure spaces and unstable realities. I mean, it proved that fear works significantly better when the environment itself is compromised. That specific stain of hostility, it's still recognized decades later. That's why the first game feels so eerie even within its own franchise. It rarely gets the sprawling video essays or the heavy mythologizing. It just sits there at the beginning, half broken, patient zero, carrying the exact sickness that the rest of the series would spend years trying to name. When you go back to it today, it doesn't feel like a polished start to a massive IP. It feels like the exact moment the wound opened.